Hello, we're back and it's episode 4. Something felt off, and yes, it did. So, where do I start? I suppose I should start by saying not every session felt the same, obviously, right? No massage is ever the same, no energy session is ever the same. You know? Some were clear, some were neutral, and some felt off. And not in a dramatic way, just enough to make you pause and wonder, I suppose, what you were actually tapping into. I did that a lot. You can imagine, right? You question everything. So up to this point anyway, everything I've described could sound quite controlled. You learn the state, you access it, you explore it. And sometimes you get the results. But not every experience felt the same. And this is where things started to shift for me. Because when you're working in that kind of state, you're not just observing, you're interacting with something. Even if you don't fully understand what that is. And trust me, that happened a lot as well. You know, some sessions felt completely neutral, almost clinical, you know. You'd go in, you'd pick things up and you'd come out. Not really any emotional charge or nothing unusual anyway. And then some felt really clear, you know. Like everything was just working, you know. They were sweet days. You'd pick up impressions and they would make sense. And there was a flow to it, you know. But then there were others. And they were different. There was no clear reason, no obvious trigger. But the feeling of the session changed. I suppose it's hard to describe unless you've experienced it, but it's the same kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and something just doesn't feel right. Nothing you can point to, nothing you can explain, but you know it. That same feeling would sometimes show up during a remote viewing session. It wasn't fear, that's important. I wasn't scared. I was never one of those people who got spooked easily in this remit. It was more like a subtle awareness that something about this wasn't neutral anymore. And when that happens, your attention shifts, not because you panic, but because you become more aware, I suppose. There were moments when I'd come out of a session and just sit there, thinking, what was that? What had I seen? I'll chill it by saying not in a dramatic way, but sometimes there was edges to that. But even then, not in a way that made me want to stop, but enough to make me realise this wasn't just a technique. Because if it was, you know, just imagination, if it was just your mind making things up, it would actually feel consistent, predictable. But the interesting thing was, it didn't. And that inconsistency, that change in feeling, that's what stayed with me. There were also times where coming back didn't feel clean. You'd come out of a state, but your body hadn't fully caught up yet. And you did feel slightly off, not fully back. And again, it wasn't extreme, it was just a noticeable thing, you just didn't feel, you felt a little bit edgy, like everything just didn't quite sit back in the box, Predominantly, if you came out too quickly, okay? Or classically, I think I mentioned it before, if somebody interrupted you. I suppose you could call it an integration period where you had to let everything settle back into place. And during that time, you sometimes just had to sit there quietly, trying to make sense of it all. I used to reach for something really simple, a cup of tea, something sweet, biscuit, whatever. That kind of helped me ground myself again and bring everything back neatly into its box. But because, trying to explain that feeling to someone else isn't actually that easy. Think about it for a second. How do you describe feeling slightly outside your body with people that don't get it? That's the key, right? You got to remember, you're mostly dealing with people that just don't get it. But all that time you're still sat there in your body. And if the people around you aren't that familiar with this kind of thing, that's hard. It's hard on them, to be fair, okay? So a lot of that just stayed internal. A lot of that was never discussed or passed on. It was something you processed quietly. But those moments, those sessions that felt different, they were important. Because they introduced a question. Not about whether it worked, but about what it actually was. What are you accessing? Where is that information coming from? And why does it sometimes feel different? And I didn't have answers to that. But you know what? Weirdly, I didn't need to, okay? Because at that stage, I wasn't trying to explain it. And here's a key sentence. I was just experiencing it. And recognising that not everything felt the same was part of that experience. Because if you're going to explore something like this, you have to be honest about all of it, right? Not just the parts that make sense. I hope that's been interesting. We are going to move very shortly onto episode 5, where we talk about the way it changed me. Stay tuned. Be well, be safe.